Hi friends, welcome to The Current Temp, and today we're talking about local television. And man, is it changing quickly. We've got streaming, we've got social media, we've got audience fragmentation. So where does that leave our beloved nightly newscast? And of course, now there's news all day long as well. Today, I'm going to sit down with the man who's running one of our city's best TV stations, and we will get to him in just a second. But the first thing I want to do is thank our sponsor. Welcome to The Current Temp, sponsored by Lexus of Memphis, a fantastic product, amazing men and women, amazing service department. We are just so proud to have them as a partner with us, and I'm so honored to have this guy right here, my friend Chris Franklin. Chris is the president and general manager of WATN ABC 24 here in Memphis. Chris, thank you for being here.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I was going down the memory road. Chris and I have known each other for a long time, and Chris has been in this business and around this business for hundreds of years. You wouldn't know that from looking at him. But let's start with this, Chris. And this is a tough one to give you right out of the gate. But when you look back, I saw your post the other day about that skinny kid coming out of high school. Yeah, when you look back, what drew you initially towards, let's say, production and news? I'm not going to say just news because you've had a long, different career. Mm-hmm. What drew you towards that?
Well, in 8th grade, I was enrolled in what is now known as Nashville School of the Arts. And so that program and going all the way through my high school years is what kind of introduced me to media and creative production and mass comm. And the summer in my 16, when I was 16 years old, that summer, you know, the previous year they did not have a teacher for me, you know, at the Arts Magnet School. And so the drama teacher, Mr. Dan Easterly, I'll never forget him because this was that moment it kind of exposed me to the world. He got some funding and sent me to UCLA's campus for a week. I got to stay on campus, you know, by myself.
How old were you? What grade?
16. Okay. I was going into my junior year.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I even flew back by myself.
Wow.
So that was something else. But staying on campus, not only did we get to see, you know, everything that UCLA has to offer, we got to see and visit the LA Times, USC Film School. I got to see Star Wars, the guy George Lucas. I got to see his first student film, and boy, it was terrible. I'm telling you. But it's cool to see that we all have, you know, humble beginnings.
How did that impact you?
Well, what inspired me was kids my age were out running around campus, shooting their own films and their own videos, and I was like, if they can do it, I can do it.
So you saw this as possible.
It's potential. Yeah.
Okay, let's continue that train of thought. You're in LA, you're on the West Coast at a young age. Let's fast forward to 2025. How much have we seen, and by we I mean you, things change so dramatically? I was thinking the other day about how it's hard to talk to kids now and explain a time pre-internet or smartphone. They don't get it. But going back to the old, you know, TV sets, you know, the old 3-4 TV sets, and how we didn't have the internet and we were doing weather with, you know, ticker machines. Talk briefly about how that has just been like on a rocket, just not just technology, but the way we do news.
Yeah, one of my buddies, or actually I'd say colleagues, he posted on LinkedIn about the variations of Photoshop going back, and when I hopped in, it was Photoshop 4. And Photoshop 4, in order to do a drop shadow, you would have to duplicate the layer, make it black, blur it, offset it, and then you finally had your drop shadow. And now you just click a button, and right, in Photoshop, and you automatically have that drop shadow. And so that's kind of what's happened with media. That's what's happened with moving from tape to digital, and even from, you know, rebroadcasting a nightly news to streaming anytime that you want. And so it's adapting and adjusting based on the new tools that have been developed over the years. So it's knowing how and when, you know, just because you find a new plugin or a new tool doesn't mean it needs to be used excessively.
Right. Right. Don't use every filter or sound effect.
Exactly. And so that's kind of what's happened right now. We've been, you know, AI, for example, has all these new tools, and it feels like people are throwing stuff to the wall to see what sticks. But if you are a creator, if you're a writer, a shooter, an editor, and you understand how to tell a story, those tools, those quick buttons like the drop shadow, those are just tools to help you magnify your storytelling gifts.
Let's drill down
Yeah.
on that, because as you're saying that, I'm realizing we're taking the burden of technology and those skills out of the picture. And so what does that put the focus on? In other words, back in the day, you had to do 18 steps to do a drop shadow. But now if anybody can do a drop shadow, what's the new currency?
Yeah, what are you doing with the drop shadow? So what it is, AI will eliminate some jobs, but it'll create new ones, right? And so you have to,
Apply that to TV news.
well, you have to know how to use AI, otherwise you will become obsolete,
Right.
Right. So I won't specifically say a job that will be created, because who knows what advancements come within the next week or 6 weeks. I mean, you see Facebook every 3 months; it feels like it looks and it feels different. But there are potentials, there are opportunities that we have not yet discovered, and I do think if we master our gifts and find our purpose, we'll find avenues and create opportunities and create jobs, create nonprofits, create business avenues and opportunities. Just one example is Airbnb. You know, without the internet, there's no way Airbnb would exist. And who would even have thought about renting rooms and renting homes to what has, ultimately replaced some hotel chains? You know, so you can't really necessarily say technology is the devil. There are some spaces in which it has become that, but you got to learn how to adapt and evolve, and then use your gifts and skills and techniques to create new opportunities.
Okay, I could spend a lot of time on this, and I was going to ask you another question, but I've got other things I want to ask you. All right, so as you know, local TV stations really held the monopoly on broadcasting forever. And I'm thinking back when we had like 3 or 4 stations. Then we get cable and satellite, and we've got all these different ways to absorb media through technology, as you just said. I have had, my time spent in TV news, watched that begin its dramatic, momentum, but it just seems to get faster every year. Over the past few years, what have you seen and sensed about how this transition is occurring? Because I know streaming and your online social media presence, I can remember when it wasn't a big deal. It was like a toy. What do we do with this? And now it's definitely a revenue, stream, and it's a big deal. I know it's a big deal with your company. Talk about that for a minute.
Well, I mean, it depends on if it's content or it's community. Each platform is a social media space, right?
Break that down. What do you mean?
So places like Facebook are when you can create groups, or even, LinkedIn. I mean, that's a space in which certain communities kind of get together and engage in alignment in some regard of whatever topics are going on. That's a place to find community. There are places and sources to get content from. So you're not engaging if you're using your smart TV to stream, a network news channel. So, social media and digital, there's some crossover, there's some overlap, but there's also definitive spaces in which, even within the social media space, there are certain demographics that engage with one over the other. And so there are rabbit holes inside of rabbit holes. But, the important thing for us is to try to create, be the aggregator of information. So YouTube is the aggregator of information. People go to YouTube to get information. What, I think local news can be, finding our digital space and streaming space, is be the aggregator of information so people will come to us. It doesn't help us to throw everything we have on YouTube, because then YouTube becomes the main source, the Google and YouTube and the one big monster to own everything. We do think it's important. Well, I do. I think it's important for us to be the platform in which we become the source of information, but because we're local, the source of local information.
Which is a big deal.
Yeah.
Which I think is the key to this whole thing. I remember when we began the push back in the day, okay, we're not just doing a story for on air, we also have to do a story that goes online. But I would think that it's, and I've been out of that mix for a few years. Is that even more progressed now?
Well, I think it's edited differently.
Explain that.
So
for the format, you mean?
Well, not just the format, but each platform. X is what you would produce to go on X needs to be thought about that audience and how they like to receive content, right? And obviously, when it was Twitter, it was that 128 characters, was it, that you had to maximize?
Right.
So there were people who were brilliant at creating content and stories within 128
Words or
characters,
less.
right? Words or less. And so you have to know the platform and the people that it's reaching in order to connect with them. I was emotional marketer is what I call myself. So to connect with them on an emotional level, so they remember and they engage and they come back to engage again.
How do you keep all that straight as in this? And again, I'm saying this as someone who's had to stick a toe in that. When that carousel moves so quickly, you're not just doing a story now that goes on a TV screen. You've got to think about it as a social media push on Facebook. Is it going to go on TikTok? How do you manage all that?
Well, so in the Inspire Media Conference, when I started that and I started teaching classes, the first thing I told people who were trying to dip their toe in social media was go deep then wide. And I got that from Brady Shearer. You can follow him. He's the kind of the church media guru, right? And going deep first, you can get all the handles you want, whether, whatever social media platforms that you think you might use, but focus on the one that you think is your target audience. Learn the ins and outs of that and make that work.
That's the deep part.
That's the deep. Go
Okay.
deep on, if you think most of your people are on Facebook, go deep in creating content and creating community on Facebook, right? And then as you begin to grow that audience, invite those people on Facebook to join you in the other spaces.
So in other words,
right?
don't do one great instead of a bunch mediocre.
Right. And now obviously there are some that you need to kind of engage with if we're on a podcast. So if podcast and it's a video podcast and Google owns YouTube, then it's probably a good idea for you to be on YouTube. I mean, so you kind of want to think about some crossover. But if most of your community engages with you on Facebook and you want to comment back, and that's the space in which you live, which you're most comfortable with, you may not want to go all the way. And you may want to put some clips on YouTube that then invite them to join you on your podcast on your Facebook account. I mean, I don't know.
That's great advice.
I mean, but there's so many different approaches. It really depends on kind of where you're most comfortable, where your audience is, and then the tools that you have at your exposure, right?
So let's talk briefly about how the viewership has changed. I don't know that we're, gone are the days when I would come home as a kid and everybody settled down for, Cronkite or, Dan Rather, whoever, at 5 p.m. I know there's still those viewers out there, but how do you see that evolving? How has that changed?
Yeah, it's so funny. Like 2 years ago, maybe it was 3 years ago now, but we rebranded ourselves as ABC 24 News Right Now. Okay, we were already thinking in the future about when do people want news? When they want it, right?
On demand.
On demand, right? So you don't necessarily need to wait for the 6, 9, 10 o'clock news or your morning show. If it can be streamed at any time, then what time it is the right time. It's the news right now for them, right? And so ultimately, there are other networks that have gone a 24-hour stream, and they have an anchor that sits there for 5 hours, and they swap out with the next anchor.
Really?
Yeah, that's part
Just
of
continuous.
that's a model. Yeah,
Really? Continuous streaming.
continuous streaming. But that's just a model. There are some that I think Roland Martin does it. He does nightly for a few hours every night, I think, and I think he's done well with it. And he left the cable news platform. Excuse me. So there's so many different models that can be adapted, but they also, I don't think they stay the same. If you go back and look at a streaming platform for news pre-pandemic, because they did exist. I mean, Hope, we streamed before, but we adapted it based on when the pandemic hit. So an example of that is we had our stream up where you can go to hopechurchmemphis.com/live. I don't mean to plug. I'm just trying to use that as an example.
No, talk.
So we had that so you can go there, but then when there were people who automatically had their Roku TV and Apple TV and those apps we could automatically create after we launched. But the cool thing about our hopechurchmemphis.com/live was there was almost like a, when you go to a church and there's the foyer area and then an information desk, there was like an information desk picture of the person who was working the digital information desk. And if you had a question about the church, the faith, the mission, you can chat with them and they can respond back during service.
Wow. Okay.
And so, we created a streaming platform, but then it became more community and engaging once the pandemic hit because nobody was in the building. We had to figure out a way to
how to
adapt.
reach them.
Yeah.
How do you see that movement today? Let's say taking that mentality and going to TV news. Do you see more people going to that? I want to see it on my phone all the time. And is the phone now the primary vehicle?
It depends on the generation. My niece, when she comes back from Phoenix, she just finished at Arizona State last year. So when she comes back from Phoenix and she's sitting in our living room, we have this big, huge, 65-inch television where she can watch Netflix and stream old episodes of what's the doctor show that was on ABC? The Grey's Anatomy, that's what it was. Instead of watching on the big TV, she'll pull out her little iPhone and watch Grey's Anatomy.
She'll take a 4-inch screen over 65 inches of beauty.
So it depends on who it is and what generation they're from and what they prefer. But I think human behavior is it's somewhat predictable. You can tell there's data and algorithms and all that stuff that helps you understand directions that you could go. But if you sit and watch someone and you can make some adjustments based on what you see without looking at the data. Data is important.
Yeah.
The effectiveness of some of the videos that we did when I was director of media at Hope Church. There was one creative. It was a high holy Easter. It was Easter, and we had the sand artist. I don't know if you remember the sand artist.
Yeah.
So the sand artist came to Hope, and he created this scene during a live music presentation. And so he would wipe it clean. It was on America's Got Talent too, but he would wipe it clean, make a new scene, and all that stuff. And so the very end of it, he did this magical blah blah blah. I won't talk about it. I want you to go Google it and watch it. But the cool thing for me was during that service, my role was to do one thing. I was in the catwalk, and as they pulled his desk to do the sand art with, my job was to get the camera there, focus it, and just don't move. Don't shake the camera. Don't be so. The whole service, like I'm sitting up there and I set the camera. So after I set the camera, I'm just sitting there and I'm looking at people. And so the cool thing about looking at people watching, it's fun. The cool thing about people watching is you see the impact that it's having, and you know whether something works or it didn't work.
Yeah.
And that's what I do with video a lot. But during that service, there was a couple that you're sitting as far away as you and I are. And during the sand artist, they got a little bit closer, and at the end, the husband was holding the wife, and they were crying. And so that's not anything you're going to get from data and analytics and research and insights, but you know that connected with someone on a deep level,
That's
an
a real
emotional
impact.
level, real impact. And so a lot of that needs to be a part of your research. But how do you do that if everything is digital?
Right.
So there's still space for in-person. There's still space for live events like covering parades or Friday Night Football, still getting out in the community. And that community connection and that local news connection is still very real.
Okay, it's a great spot to ask this question. Let's talk about that local connection. I know that you are extremely passionate about serving the community. I know that's one of the reasons why you got into this and why you do what you do. That's not always easy to do. We know that. We have different corporations. We have companies buying companies, and sometimes it doesn't facilitate the ease with which we would like for that to happen. That is a key component to us knowing our communities, but talk about that community commitment when you weigh it against the fact that we have a national movement of growing distrust against media. It's just something that has come about, especially on the national level. What have you seen, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to sometimes change a person's heart or mind with a fact, right?
Okay.
But what you can do is create a relationship in which I'll hear you and you'll hear me, right? And so I think what we do, one of our brand pillars is Memphis Lovers. When you love on somebody, the reciprocation is different. The communication, the conversation is different.
100%.
And so when we're out telling stories, we're not just out there covering the facts. I think that was the gift in which Oprah Winfrey gave us years ago. Oprah Winfrey, when she was a reporter in Nashville, she wouldn't just go out and cover a fire in East Nashville. She would get footage of the fire, but she'd ask the people whose home burned down, how are you?
By the way, pause. Your uncle helped Oprah Winfrey get her first radio gig,
yes,
correct?
WVOL.
Tell that real quick.
Clarence Kilcrease, he's actually my great uncle, right? But he when Oprah was in college at Tennessee State University, he got her on at a job at WVOL radio station, and when she applied for the job at News Channel 5 in Nashville, he was the one that gave her that recommendation.
And that's really where she took off.
And that's where she took off. But it wasn't just her. It was 30, 40, 50 young people at that time in which he developed.
So he really had a skill for
Yeah,
that.
he did.
Okay,
Yeah.
just a connection. So go back to what you were saying. Oprah was
even remember
asking.
what I was saying.
You were saying she asked people to fire. She was,
Yeah.
You know, she was getting down to maybe more emotional level. Is that
Yeah, on an emotional level, and that's really where storytelling needs to live. If you tell the story in which you are, and again, our brand pillar is Memphis lovers and solution seekers, among 4 others. But if you tell the story with the heart of those 2 things, your product is going to come out different. You're not going to be salacious. You're not chasing ambulances. You're not going after every shooting that comes on the scanner. And so that storytelling approach, it's more difficult to do. You know, it definitely is, because you see a lot of clicks, and you see, you know, human behavior sometimes. Oh man, there's a shooting and blah 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 blah, and then people will click on that. But if we can grow an audience which wants news that doesn't paint Memphis in a light in which it's already getting beat up on, in
Right.
which we can encourage, again, loving on somebody is a completely different response. You'll get a completely different response by just telling them that they're bad.
right?
And
They know you care.
Right. They know, and that's the thing.
You know, as you're saying that, I'm realizing too that part of the sociological experience of a broadcast versus an audience, the audience also sees TV news as their ally or bodyguard or protector. And I say that because to this day, I've been out of news now 3 years. I still get people who will message me wanting help about their air conditioning went out and the apartment complex won't deal with it. There's really a role there national news doesn't have to be an ally for the disenfranchised, for the people who feel like they don't have a voice. I mean, I really think that's a big part of it.
It is. I mean,
They just want somebody to stand up for them.
Yes. Here's the truth, though. If you ask 10 people where they get their news, 8 out of 10 will probably say not their local news station.
Yeah.
So
What would they say?
They would say, well, you know, I only check, you know, when there's severe weather coming.
Yeah.
You know, then obviously there's nobody dedicated to making sure that they're safe than the local meteorologist. But again, if we can become the aggregator of information about stuff that they care about, then I think news is what news is to you. Part of our job is adapting to figure out what news is to the Memphis Mid-South viewer. Yeah. Let me not just stop
Tri-state.
Yeah.
Yeah. We cover a big footprint.
I was talking to an official in DeSoto County, and he was telling me, look, man, I would watch you guys, but you know, we need to know what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. You guys don't cover Jackson, Mississippi.
Right.
So we're watching Tupelo and we're watching the Jackson stations online. And I'm like, you're right. You're in our backyard, but we don't really cover the stuff that, quote, you care about.
Yeah.
And so we have to care and love on all areas, not just, you know, the inside the loop.
Well, and plus, when you're doing streaming, you're losing the local footprint. It could go national.
It could go national. Yeah.
That's a great point. And how do you do that with manpower? Okay, that you didn't expect this question.
Uh-oh.
But as your budgets tighten, as number crunchers will crunch, and you have to do more with less. I'm thinking back to my time. How do you meet that challenge? And that's just a normal capitalist, issue where companies want to tighten it up, have less. Let's take down the overhead. Let's do more with less. How do you meet that today?
No, we just redefine our business model. We don't adapt or adjust. We innovate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to rethink what local news is supposed to be, and you can't get stuck on what was. If you get, it's like if you had a job and you left a job because you were frustrated with what you didn't have, and then somebody new came in with a fresh pair of eyes, they didn't know anything that you knew.
You're hitting me right on my heart. That's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
right. Those fresh eyes. So are you seeing that now? Fresh eyes coming in, seeing opportunities where, let's say, a veteran might have a grievance. I see that. You've got people who have always done. People hate change, and they don't want to innovate maybe as much as we need. Is that really why we? I mean, and I guess economics is another part of why we bring in younger and cheaper. It's just part of the deal. But do you see the younger ones are coming in with better attitudes? And that's a loaded question.
I wouldn't say that. I think they have a perspective, and some of the seasoned veterans have a perspective. I mean, no, just by its nature, we've got more young journalists than anybody, but we're having to mold them at what we want them to be versus what they see at others.
When you say by its nature, what do you mean? What drives that?
we are doing journalism different. And so when we get somebody who's 1-2 years out of school and they've been in a market somewhere, they were taught and trained a certain way that is the opposite. And so having to retrain them takes time and energy.
Sure.
Oh man, I had a point about of having a conversation differently. So it's not what we have to argue against. It's about getting them or getting the team to see a perspective that they hadn't considered. It's changing the conversation versus, like, you threw a question at me before and he's like, I was loaded. I didn't mean to load it. So a lot of the questions come loaded, but we have to figure out how to change the conversation so they can understand that there is a broader, bigger, personal development is one of them. Trying to get people to realize, hey, if you want more money, let's really look at the 3 to 5 year plan as your personal development. They have to realize that you're invested in their growth because they're probably not going to be there 18, 20 years.
Right.
So what is it that you're learning right now in this season of your career, which develops and prepares you to do what you want to do next?
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect lead into this question, and we're almost done. We're not going to keep you here all day. You're a busy man. You and I had a conversation a couple of years back about a person in a position you were trying to counsel. This person was not extremely open to your counsel, which I thought was extremely wise. It was in their best interest. What would you say to a person who's coming up or a parent who's trying to counsel their child? What attitude should they have if they want to work in journalism, broadcast news? What attitude do they need to succeed? And I say that because I know that we've had some people who have pushed back on guidance. In this particular instance, no names, no issues, you gave what I thought was great advice, which was just rejected. So if you've got a prospect out there, what would you say to them? If they say, I'm talking to Chris Franklin, General President of ABC 24, what would you say to them?
So it's almost like I'm flipping the conversation again, but it's not. It's adaptive leadership. It's not per se what I would say to them in that moment. It's looking at all the pieces. All the pieces matter. So even though I think there's a perspective they need to look at, they may not be ready to hear that yet, even though that's the thing that would, be that serendipitous moment to change their life and perspective. Sometimes it's to continue to ask questions until they arrive to it themselves. So one of the things that my predecessor, Rick Regala, one of the things that he taught me was definitely don't give anyone the answer that you don't think they're ready for, because they won't hear it. Continue to ask questions and ask questions and ask it a third and fourth time until they either come up with the answer for themselves or they step back and they think for a minute. Because in that reset is when new information potentially could be received. When they step back for that moment, in that moment, you realize in your adaptive leadership approach that that's the time to talk about being open with humility, or this is not the season for promotion. Or because I could tell somebody right now, hey, I know you want to be director of sales. You're not ready to be the director of sales right now. I could say that because that's true, but is that true statement in this moment what they need to hear? Probably not. It's preparing their heart and their mind for being open to development, being open to becoming their the next best move, like in chess, being their next best position to prepare them to do the next thing to get them to a leadership role. The harder conversations, I think, are generational.
Such as
someone who I would say someone who's in their 60s who having to work with someone in their 20s, and how they look at work and responsibility and ethics, and how they look at the value of mental health and feeling safe and good vibes and so the generations is which those two have been raised in as to what they expect for work, and they're working in the same environment. Sometimes those become more of the clashes because they have a different perspective on what this job should do, right? This person has spent their life and then this is generalization. I'm sorry.
No, it's
Generalization. This person has spent their life, and their job may have been their identity, and so they take it with the most seriousness. And this person hasn't yet decided what they want to do in their life yet. Their mind isn't fully formed, but they're super brilliant.
right.
So sometimes, the two of them coming together to work in a space is where you see more of the conflicts, and then the leader in that space learning how to get the team to work as a team and charge the same goal and inspire them to do things as a unit. That becomes more of the charge. I'm not even sure if I answered your question.
You did. No, you did, and you answered more than I actually asked. And so finish it up with this. If you had to give a generalized blueprint, what qualities are you looking for? And I know that can change depending on exactly what job you're filling, but overall, if you had to give your niece or a friend's kid some advice, what qualities do they need coming in? What will serve them well?
Be open. Don't go in thinking you know all the answers. And
so be open to listen and learn.
Be open to listen and learn, but also, don't think that the boss is your enemy. I think I've said,
that seems to be that's a good point. Where if they walk in and think the lines are already drawn, and I've seen you go in the other direction, going, "No, I'm trying to help you get to where you need to go."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I don't think any of us will be in these same roles at this station or any operation for 20 years.
Right.
And so, my grandfather talked about the greatest works of God have been through people, and so. That's ultimately what I'm trying to do is help someone be a better version of themselves. You can call it ministry or you can just call it mentorship. I do think there's less mentorship going on in this world right now. I think there's more influencers who think they can give you a 60-second clip on how to achieve something.
Yeah.
And mentorship is calling you out on things that you could do better and understanding that what you did needs correction.
Yeah.
Fred Jones has been mentoring me, and it's been interesting to see how he grew the Southern Heritage Classic, but also how he, kind of sees the world. And we're all human. We're all not going to make the best decisions all the time. But man, those failures, boy, you learn so much. I learned so much through those. My business, I remember. I had my business during the pandemic on June 20th, 2008. I had a client. It was a funeral home that owed me, I think, $10,000, and so they paid me that $10,000, and it was great until their check bounced. And I had employees' checks out on that. I had my rent out on that, and remember it was 2008, so this was the recession. And so those are, that was kind of the beginning of me trying to pivot and survive. And nobody was there, teaching me how to do it at that season. And that's why a lot of the issues and challenges, I'll say that, challenges that I have at the station, when I stop and think about what's really important, it's the people. And there were some decisions that I have to wrap my head around and do my best to support, even though I know this decision is going to be made with or without me. And I try to do my best to encourage and support the people who, reported to me, who trusted me, because that you can be in a position of leadership and not have a position of influence. And I think the influence is more important than having the title. Because that influence is earned through showing people your character and your integrity, and then if you're just a title, then it's really tough to rally the team and get people, because there are people who are sitting in the second and third chair. I've talked about that before. People who are not in a leadership position that have more influence in the room,
right?
And those people are hard to come by. And those people, some of those people don't want a leadership position. They enjoy sewing into people. They enjoy telling stories about Memphis. They enjoy, rallying the troops, and that's the space in which they find joy.
Well, you keep serving me up great entries into my next question. let's talk about leadership, and then we'll wrap this up. You said earlier, and I think this is a part of what makes you successful as an outside observer. You clearly care and are invested in how the person is developing. I've seen that from you over the years, which is unusual, and it's a tribute to you. I received no cash to say that. What have you learned? And this is you don't have to give me a comprehensive answer on this, because I know you and I have talked enough about. You have said things that have stunned me in their complexity about that leadership role. So, tell me something you've learned about that leadership role just in this entity. You've had different leadership roles, but when you're in a situation like a general manager TV station, where ownership can change, where the structure can change, where people leave, and where budgets change, and you have to make hard calls. What's been a challenge, or what have you leaned into as a leader? What have you learned? Give us something from that perspective.
Yeah, we've been through a lot of change.
And let me help you prime the pump. I have, one of the things I've admired about you is your willingness and eagerness to be mentored. Even though you're a grown man, a successful man who is a pillar in the community, I've still seen you reach out to older, more successful men and said, please help teach me more. I want to learn more. And I've seen you try to pass that down just by what you said a minute ago about adaptive leadership. That's a unique approach. In other words, I've seen you work where you don't use a sledgehammer to kill a fly. You've got to be more of a surgeon and figure out, how do I reach this person? It's probably a difficult question for you to answer because it's stuff you do so naturally, but I'm telling you that from somebody who's not in that role, you're doing some unique stuff. So maybe it's just more of, tell me more how you try to lead.
I think the approach is active listening. So, when I used to do interviews, doing testimonials, I would have a list of questions and I would ask those questions based on their response in the moment, and reading that situation, I would change the question, or I would not say anything and let that moment sit. One of the toughest interviews that I had was a mom. It was with the Mid-South Transplant Foundation, a mom who I cannot remember the number. It was like 5 kids that she lost in the house fire.
Wow.
And then one of them survived, I think, and their organs could be used to save somebody else's life, which is why I was interviewing her. And so to have to interview her and knowing when to bring moments of levity and knowing when to be silent and let her be in her emotions, that was a tough interview. And so active listening and leadership is extremely important because, there may be something, again, I talked about earlier, that you want to tell them, but they may not be ready to listen to it yet. But as you ask questions and they answer them, and then you have a follow-up question that takes them to a space in which they're then ready to receive it. So I think active listening and then asking questions based on what you hear sets the tone and lays the foundation for a more authentic relationship. And it's not all successful. There have been people who I thought they were on the trajectory to do well, but inherently who they are, where they're, because you can be a leader and not have character or integrity. You think it's automatic, but it's not. So you have, just like you can have a doctor that's just not a good doctor, or a therapist that's not a good therapist, And so, there are levels. And so as I've tried to invest in people, I've had some, I wouldn't say failures, but I think people where I thought they were open, they weren't. And then it came back to make the situation in the office worse. And then obviously as a leader protecting the entire flock, I had to make a decision to go a different direction or to change my approach to their leadership, whether they should be a part of the leadership team. So, I don't want to say it's a loaded question, but it's very particular, and you have to listen.
You've answered it just through the listening, because we've all had bosses, managers who don't listen, who have a very direct or abrasive or just kind of a steamrolling management style. Do it because I said so. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you're trying to figure out how to reach the individual. And like you said, you can't fix every problem. Not every situation is going to turn out perfect. But what I'm taking from that is the suggestion to listen in the moment instead of thinking and you said this about becoming a new employee, instead of thinking you have all the answers. Does that sound right?
That's pretty close. Yeah.
Well, listen, we are about to wrap this up. I would not let you get out of here without this next slide. Now, if you are listening to this on Spotify, I'm sorry, but if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, there he is. I love this picture.
I had hair.
Look at that. This was, I forget what year this was. This was one of our first promos at the station when we worked for the Fox affiliate. And you were in marketing. I know everybody except for this guy.
I don't know. Yeah,
Paul Sloan, Maylin Biggs, David Stotts, Kip Gordon, me in a kid's tub with a. You guys won a ton of awards for this.
Yeah.
But isn't that a great memory? We had leaves flying all over the. We had fans going and leaves flying.
So that changed the industry. I'm not sure if you remember, but ProMax is like the Grammys or the Emmys
Talk about it, because I learned it because of this.
My goodness. So this one came in like second place
At
behind
ProMax, right?
ProMax for behind like a promo for the NBC Winter Olympics and the Desperate Housewives back when it was a thing.
Right. So you guys went up against national issue.
Well, they got recognition. So because they do based on market size, but this one was so great that other stations around the country began to steal
Emulate
this.
it.
Yep, they steal this.
By the way,
concept.
nothing to do with me. This was him and this team, but you guys got tremendous amount of exposure for this. This was a phenomenal. It was
good.
No hype weather, wasn't that it?
No hype weather.
Yeah.
And David, David Stotts, he was a rare breed because he was a Marine, so he had this, whatever it takes, got to get it done attitude.
Yeah.
But he was also a film guy and a creative.
Very creative.
And so I never worked with anybody who was going to find a way to get it done. But then, because most of the people that I work with, especially people who I've hired when I had my production company, either they were really, really creative and never hit deadlines, or they were always hitting deadlines and their stuff was terrible. So he was kind of the rare breed that had the good mix of both. And he has worked for the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah.
He's a creative service director, VP, up at a station in Richmond, Virginia. So what he's been able to do, and I mean, all of them are great.
So talented.
At St. Luke,
Yeah.
St. Jude, and
Kip's
Paul,
talented. Everybody. Paul, listen, but David has got more hardware than he knows what to
does.
do with.
Oh,
That
my
guy
gosh.
would win everything. Listen, we're going to wrap up with this. We're going to give you an easy question.
B.
You
Not
know,
multiple choice.
No multiple choice. Tell me from your heart what you wish TV news could be. You started out as a young man. You've worked in the church field. You have had an Inspire conference that is amazing. You're back in this leadership position. What is your wish for TV news to be? Local TV news.
It's a business, but it's a ministry at the same time, right? So I like the term creative capitalist because it's finding creative ways to impact the community and the common economy, but still finding ways to make money. Henry Ford did it when he made the is it T1 model, whatever it is, that Model T, where he made it affordable for his employees to afford it, and so they were able to have vehicles and cars, but then his revenue went way up. So I think there's a way to serve, but there's a way to serve where we help businesses grow here. There's a way to serve to make sure that solutions are created for those who are, the HVAC are out of the apartment or their neighborhood's flooding or whatever it is, or keeping them safe because of the weather. So I think we are much like in the Bahamas. Everything is ministry of education, ministry of defense, ministry of whatever. All of their civic or operations.
It's all a ministry.
It's all a ministry. So I do think our TV station is like a ministry because we serve so many sectors, in the city, and we have the opportunity to. Let me say that.
Listen, folks, this is a talented man who can do anything. So I know those corporations are going to be coming after you. Chris Franklin, one of my dear friends, and I'm so proud of him and the work he does. Again, a thank you to Lexus of Memphis. I cannot say enough great things about these people and what they do. Just an amazing product. Just an honor to be partnered with them. And let me tell you that if you've got a thought, a comment of a show you'd like to see or somebody you'd like to recommend for us to talk to or maybe have on the show, you can email us. It's thecurrenttemp@gmail.com. Of course, you can watch us on Facebook. You can subscribe on YouTube, or you can listen on Spotify anytime you want to. Chris, thank you for being here, my friend.
All right, Joey. Boom.